Hello and welcome back to Rev Real Estate School. I'm your host, Michael Montgomery, and today what we're looking at is the 9 main reasons why real estate agents fail. So the beauty of this is if you are seeing yourself in any of these 9 reasons, all of these things are learnable and reversible. So what we mean by that is if you're not sure what to do when it comes to one of these domains, you can learn it. And on the other side of this, if you've already gotten yourself down the road and you say to yourself, well, I need to actually change course, all of these things are reversible. Now, ultimately, when we take a step back and we think, why do most real estate agents fail? It's the same reason why almost every business fails. It all comes down to number of leads, number of prospects, number of people that we're dealing with. Why does any company go out of business? Generally speaking, they'll call it a cash flow problem, which means they do not have enough revenue coming in. And that's the exact same reason why most real estate agents fail. But we have to go a little bit deeper than that. What's actually causing the lack of leads and the lack of production? That's what we're going to unpack using these 9 different concepts that if you fall into one of these traps, you're going to want to work your way out of this over time. All right, reason number 1, real estate agents who fail tend to not want to stand out from the crowd. Now, oftentimes when we think to ourselves, we don't want to put ourselves out there, we think it's because we want to stay safe. But in fact, not putting ourselves out there is really the biggest risk that we can take because we have to be putting ourselves out there. We have to be posting on social media. We have to be connecting with people. And we think if we don't do it, well, it's the safest decision. But in fact, you are still making a decision. So whether you post, you're making the decision that, hey, you might post something and somebody might comment in a negative light. But if you don't post, you're not going to get enough leads. Next, we have number 2, you're not persistent enough. Almost every real estate agent needs to follow up more. The average real estate agent follows up with somebody one time. One time, that's it. But the average successful real estate agent follows up with people 6 times on average. Some more, some potentially less, but generally speaking, we're 6 times for successful agents and we're 1 time for less successful agents. So what is this telling you? Well, there's a very clear divide between persistence of somebody who is just not putting the full effort in and somebody who really wants to get the business. Now, this is really an important concept because persistence unto itself isn't really a skill. It's just a matter of having the guts to follow up with somebody. So you don't really need to have any skill to follow up. You just need to do it. And persistence is something that will, generally speaking, people who really want to play it safe are going to avoid this concept of persistence. And that is going to have a huge impact on our final line at the end of the year. So like successful agents, we suggest reaching out 6 to 8 times. 6 to 8 times before you actually close that lead down, say they're dead, say they're cold. At that point in time, yes, you can move them into the archive. But until you've reached out to them 6 to 8 times, they are still in your pipeline. Number 3 is a big one. You don't think you deserve what you want. Now, this one oftentimes can be rooted in past trauma. But here's the thing, is somebody is going to be the next new top producer in your area. Somebody's going to be that person. So why not you? Why not you? And this is something that oftentimes plays in our minds and we start to think to ourselves all these reasons why we can't. And generally speaking, that can be tied to past trauma. Now, one of the best reads on this is The Myth of Normal. The Myth of Normal is a great book that really starts to unpack, even if you don't feel like you had any previous trauma, we all have. And this book can be very, very helpful to help us start to work through this and start to see ourselves as somebody who's deserving of being a top producer. Because what you'll notice is when your mindset changes and you start focusing on the fact that yes, being a top producer is well within my realm of possibilities, you're going to start taking different actions. You're going to start operating with more confidence, and that's very noticeable to the client. Number 4 is you lack humility. Now, in real estate, there is a lot of stuff that we need to know. If we don't understand what we don't know, we are going to get ourselves into trouble. Now, when we're lacking humility, what we can end up getting ourselves into is potentially worst case legal battles. But on top of that, we can just end up giving people poor experiences because we're giving them advice without actually knowing if the advice we're giving them is actually true. And so ultimately they have a poor experience. They don't refer you to anybody. They don't use you again. And so we can't lack humility. We have to know when we don't know something. But there's 2 parts to this. The other part to this is just being resourceful enough to get that answer. Now, oftentimes we can go to our broker, we can go to somebody at our office, but other times we just have to dig down and we have to do some research. So when we lack the humility and we just kind of throw our hands up in the air and say, well, sorry, we can't help you, or worse yet, we give them an answer that we don't actually know the answer to, we start to get ourselves into trouble. Number 5, and probably the biggest one, we fail to network and build strong relationships. That is really, if we solved for that problem, a lot of the other pieces would fit in. A lot of the other pieces would fit in if we just increase the size of our networks. However, most of us don't don't really want to do that, or we think networking's dated, or we think, hey, that's probably just kind of annoying going to some networking event or doing some volunteering. But that's not the case. This will be your biggest source of leads. Your network, the people that you know, your SOI, people that you've helped before, this is your biggest source of leads. This is over 85% of leads for most agents in one's market. So why are we not focusing on this? If we focus on this, it's going to solve almost every other problem, because as our network grows, so does our production. Now, as just a quick rule of thumb, you should be asking yourself, am I out in public 2 times a week? You should be out 2 evenings a week, events, networking, whatever it might be. You need to be out with people at least 2 times a week to just start to see that network start to scale and grow. And no, it doesn't all have to be business related. It can also be personal. You can do something within a personal domain of interest, but you need to be expanding your network, because generally speaking, your network is going to shrink at about 15% per year. So people move away, people maybe get a different realtor, their friend's friend becomes a realtor. And so because of that, our databases are going to shrink by about 15% a year. So if we're not increasing it by 15%, our database is actually shrinking. Next, this one's very common. We're too distracted. There's just too many different avenues out there for us to explore. And we start to think we're going to do this, and then we stop. So for example, I'm going to start a YouTube channel, and then we stop after 2 months. And then we're going to start TikTok, and then we stop. And then we're going to start a blog, and then we're going to start reaching out to past clients, and then we're going to start geofarming. And all of this, what this is going to do is just going to lead us to being distracted. Now, if you want a really simple framework, just focus on the number of people in your database. And generally speaking, the reason I say that is because when we get too distracted, we start looking at all of these different metrics, and we start to wonder what is really that important. Well, going back to the previous one, our network is going to be the biggest and most important thing to us. So why aren't we focusing our effort on this? If we can increase the number of people in our database, our production will increase with that. So the other component of this is just knowing what you want. And oftentimes we're focused on a certain level of production. But in a sense, production, we don't always have full ability to control our production. Sometimes there's market factors, sometimes there's other factors. But what we can control is the size of our network. We can control that. So we need to start thinking about what we can control and not just be focused on the larger picture. We need to think about what it is that we can control that's going to lead to that larger picture, which is our income. Which moves us perfectly to the next one, which is not taking responsibility. Now, this is another really big one. And really what this comes down to is us saying the reason we didn't succeed is one or the other reasons. So maybe it's we didn't have a big enough network. Maybe it's we didn't have a large enough social following. Maybe it is the market is just really poor right now. Maybe it is I'm new to this city, so I don't know anybody. And we start making up these excuses. But here's the thing is we are in full control. We really are. Now, we may be new to a city, so we may have to start building new relationships. But I'll tell you right now, the person who goes out there and starts building new relationships when they land into a new city is going to be a lot more successful than that person who's just rested on their relationships over the years. You're going to be in a way better position in 2 to 3 years' time. So again, we want to come back to the concept of focus on what you can control. You can't control your production off the start. You can't, but you can control the number of people you know, which you can control that simply by talking to more people and expanding our networks. So we have to start thinking downstream. And really what we want to focus on here is inputs. We don't want to focus on outcomes. Outcomes are number of deals, GCI, that sort of thing. Instead, we want to focus on inputs. So what is it that we can do in order to control that? Well, we can expand our networks. We can be posting more on social media. We can actually be putting ourselves out there more. Those are all the inputs that then lead to the output, which is the income or the number of deals. Number 8, you don't believe it's possible. You truly don't believe it's possible. Or said another way, you think you're going to fail. But here's the thing, when it comes to this concept of failure, everyone in real estate is going to make a mistake. Everyone in real estate is going to spend money on some marketing campaign that isn't going to work. Everyone in real estate is going to choose a certain way of going about generating business that isn't going to work. So instead of thinking about everything as it having to work, think of everything as tests. And tests can fail. So if we're going out there and we're going to start say geofarming, we're going to test that. We're going to think of that as a test. We're going to fail, potentially we're going to learn, and then we're going to start again. And the problem with this one in particular is we just don't even start. We start to overthink it, we start to overanalyze, and then from there we just don't start. And a lot of that can be driven by the fact that we don't really feel like we can succeed. But like we said earlier, somebody is going to be the next top producer in your city. Somebody will be, so just why not you? You're in a position to be that, so why not you? And that's a really good question to ask ask yourself, this starts to help us move out of this mindset that we can't be a top producer. We can't hit a certain level of production. And finally, number 9, too afraid to care. What do I mean by this? Well, simply what this means is that we are not focusing on what it is that we need to be doing, such as learning, improving ourselves, and understanding our industry, understanding our market, all of these things. We are really just not trying hard enough to be really good real estate agents. Now, the reason for this is mostly because it's quite easy to become an agent. And we think as soon as we have our piece of paper, we're an agent. Not at all. That's not the way it works. Once you get your piece of paper, yes, you're licensed to go and sell real estate, but you are not at a position yet to actually be going out there and helping people. But because we have the piece of paper, we think we can. So we need to be extremely invested in our learning. And this isn't just from a marketing capacity, but this is understanding our product, understanding the process, understanding the legalities within our given area. There's so much to learn in real estate, and oftentimes we just kind of wait for an issue to come up to learn about that. That's not the right approach. Instead, we need to be investing time, money, energy into ourselves so that we can improve ourselves. And that is truly caring about your career. And as soon as you start to do that, you're going to take it more seriously and your production is going to increase. So those are the 9 main reasons why agents fail. Let us know in the comments if there is any other reasons that come to mind as to why agents fail. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Remember, you can reach out anytime at revrealestateschool.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next lesson.